All right, well, let's go over the QBA practice test today. So number one, a square has vertices. Vertices are points. They're where two sides come together to form a point. And they're located at T, 2, 2, U, 5, 2, V, 5, 5, W, 2, 5. If the square is rotated clockwise 90 degrees, all right, so that's important. Rotated clockwise 90 degrees around 0, 0. Sometimes you'll see this, it'll say around the origin. What are the coordinates of W? All right, so we're only talking about point W. That means that these have no bearing on the problem. They don't even, it's like they don't even exist. We don't need them. So rotated clockwise 90. Remember, there are two rules for 90s. The first rule is the same no matter which direction you're going. So the first rule is to take the two numbers and swap them. All right. So if I took point W, which is 2, 5, the first rule would say that I swap the two numbers. So now I have 5, 2. And since I'm going clockwise, remember we started calling that clockwise-y, because when a 90-degree rotation clockwise, you also have to change the sign of the y value. So you go to your new y value and you change its sign. So in this case, W prime would be 5, -2. All right. Look at problem number 2. It says identify the type of transformation. Well, the first thing I would notice is that they are still orientated the exact same way. T is still at the top, T and T prime, P and B are in the same orientation as well. So you can tell that it has not been rotated, it has not been flipped or reflected, because if it was reflected, T prime would also be right here, and P and B would be at the top. So all that's happened is they've taken it and they slid it up. Remember, to slide is to translate. So this is a translation. So that would be your answer for that problem. It's a translation. I need to ask you, if it was to ask if it was similar or congruent, this would be a congruent transformation. The only one that is similar is a dilation. Number 3, identify the transformation from the original to the image and tell whether the two figures are similar or congruent. Once again, this was simply a translation. It was translated to the, it was translated left and down. You can see there's no apostrophe, so that's the original pre-image, and that is the new image or prime image. Translation, and this is a congruent figure. Number 4, a square ABCD lies entirely in quadrant 2. So immediately I would recognize that I need to, on my scratch paper, draw a graph, and we know this is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. All right, remember it makes a C. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first thing is I have A, B, C, D, and it's in quadrant 2. So there's my square. It's in quadrant 2. It's reflected over the y-axis. So it's going to go from here to here, because this is my y-axis. So it reflected over. And then, so there's a second part, and then it's rotated 180 degrees clockwise about the origin. So 180 would be from right here all the way to here. Remember, when you go 180, you've got to go 2 quadrants. So from here, 1, 2. In what quadrant is the image after the combined transformation? The answer to this would be, it is now in quadrant 3. All right, number 5. Identify the transformation from the original to the image and tell whether the two figures are similar or congruent. So all you need to do is pick the first point and its corresponding or matching point. So I'm going to use E and E prime. I don't need to focus on the rest of it. I just need to look at the differences between these two. So I notice that the digits are still in the same order. I see 3, 1, 3, 1. That's the first step in identifying what's happening. If the digits were different, then I would assume either there was a dilation or a translation. Since they are the same digits, I need to see what stayed the same and what changed. I noticed that the x value stayed exactly the same, and the y value did something very specific. It changed signs. Well, if we think about the rules we've learned, there is a rule that says x stays the same and y changes sign, and that is a reflection over the x-axis. Remember, whatever you reflect across is what value will stay the same. Since the x value stayed the same, that means we reflected across the x. So the answer to this would be a reflection across the x, and they would be congruent. They did not change size or shape. They would be congruent. Number 6. Identify the transformation from the original to the image and tell whether the two figures are similar or congruent. The original figure has solid lines and the image has dashed sides. So it may be hard to tell on there, but this is the solid line figure. It is the original, I believe. Let's see, the original figure is solid, so this is the original, and this is the dash. The larger one is dashed. It's the new image. And it wants to know what happened, what transformation. Well, our choices, there's 4 choices in 8th grade. A translation, which means it's been slid somewhere. Rotation means they've turned it. We have reflection, which would make a mirror image of it. And a dilation would mean it changed size. It either got bigger or smaller. This is clearly a dilation. It got much bigger, and since it did change size, this would be similar. So your answer would be dilation and similar. Congruent means it stayed the same size, and this one did not. So this is dilation, similar. 7. What are the coordinates of the image of the point 12, 2 after translation 10 units down followed by a reflection over the y-axis? Well, 10 units down, that's going to be a -10. And since it's going down, you have to decide, does that affect the x or the y value? Well, if you've got a little confusion of which one it affects, think about the x. X is like saying no. And if you use your head to say no to somebody, you shake your head left to right, horizontally. Well, the x-axis does go horizontally, left to right. That's not what I want. I want the up and down. Well, if you were to tell somebody yes, your head would go up and down. That's exactly how the y-axis works. Just like yes, it goes up and down. So the -10 would need to come off of the y value. 12 minus nothing or plus anything is still 12. But 2 minus 10 is -8. So that is the value of the point after the translation. But it says followed by a reflection. So now we have to do a second transformation. Reflect over the y. Well, when you reflect over the y stays the same. So -8 stays -8. But the x changes sign. So your final answer is -12, -8. Problem number 8. Which describes the transformation from the original to the image and tells whether the 2 figures are similar or congruent. Well, you can see that you have a mirror image. A was 1 unit from the axis. A prime is 1 unit from the axis. B was 1, 2, 3, 4 from the axis. B prime is 1, 2, 3, 4. This is obviously a mirror image. It is a reflection, and it's a reflection across the y-axis. So the first half of your answer, reflection across the y. The second part of your answer, these are congruent. They are the same size and shape. Number 9, which of the following is not a congruence transformation? So it's asking you which one is not congruent. In other words, which one of these changed size? Well, a reflection over the x, it would stay the same size and shape. A dilation means we're typically going to change sides, and it says with a scale factor of 0.5. That is less than 1, so that means that this shape is going to shrink down from its original size. So that would be the answer you would want to choose. Could it be more than one answer? A translation. Translation is congruent, stays the same. Dilation again. Typically it's going to change size, but it says with a scale factor of 1. Well, we know anything multiplied by 1 stays the same. So a scale factor of 1 is going to produce an image exactly the same as the original. So this is not one we want to choose this time. 10. Which describes the transformation from the original to the image and tells whether the 2 figures are similar or congruent. This is another, it doesn't actually have prime symbols, so you don't know which one is the original, but either way, it's going to be a slide. So this is a translation, and they are congruent. They're the same size and shape. Translation, congruent. The lines in the diagram below represent 4 streets in Linda's hometown. Keller Street is parallel to Garcia, so these 2 are parallel lines. And it says that Main Street is parallel to 2nd Street, so these 2 are parallel as well. So we've got 2 sets of parallel lines cut by a transversal. If angle 1 is 100 degrees, what is angle 2? Well, the best way to solve this is to notice that since all of these are parallel, this could be shifted over. So if angle 1 is 100, this angle right here is also 100. These could be brought over and they would match perfectly. So it's saying that every one of the large obtuse angles over here is 100. And we know there's a zigzag pattern. This one is 100, so this one is also 100. They're vertical, so they're the same. This is another large obtuse angle, and so is this one. So here's your zigzag pattern that we're used to seeing. So if those are all 100s, and I'm going to clear this up just a little bit just to make it easier to see. would the other angle be? Well, there's only two numbers that can be used, and they're based on 180 degrees. So if this is 100, 2 is its supplement, meaning it has to add up to 180, which means that angle 2 has to be 80 degrees. All right, problem number 12. Two parallel sections of pipe are joined with a connecting pipe. As shown, what is the value of x? A lot of students fail to notice that this is just a parallel line cut by a transversal. We're very used to these. It's saying that this piece is 45 degrees. This is the smaller acute angle. What is the other interior angle on the same side? Well, this is obviously not the small acute angle. This is a larger obtuse angle. These two have to add together to make 180. So if this angle is 145, you simply do 180 minus 45. Whatever's left is the answer to the problem, and it is 135 degrees. So that is the answer to angle X. All right, problem number 13. Which line is parallel to B? So we're looking at line B, and we're looking for one that is parallel to it. Our choices are A, D, and E. I've told you many, many times over the course of this year, don't go by the way things are drawn. You must go by the numbers that are provided. They intentionally drew things wrong on this just to throw people off and see if you would pick the wrong answer. Most students are going to pick E just because it looks parallel, but if you notice, E is 90 degrees while B is 89. They do not match. Eventually, they will touch each other. You have to go by the numbers, 89, 89. So it's intentionally drawn kind of crooked to see if you'll look at the numbers. D is the correct answer.